Hi, this is a video to show you how you might use parameters in LiveCode. What I have over here are three graphics and they each have their own unique identifier. So the graphic is, the oval is 1023, the green rectangle is 1014 and the black rectangle is 1003. And on the card I have some code which will allow me to move any of the graphics. Depending on what direction I choose, I can move the graphic up, down, left or right. GID is specifying the ID of the graphic, and distance is how far I want it to move. So you can see that I've got three variables within this code, and this presents a bit of a problem because it means that this code is quite inflexible in that if I want to call this handler from out with like somewhere else in the software, I have to know that the direction needs to be in a variable that's called direction, and that the graphic ID needs to be in this variable that's called GID, and similarly distance, whatever distance I want it to travel, I have to put it in a variable that's called distance. So that means that this code is quite inflexible, and it's also quite vulnerable because it means that these variables cannot be used for anything else, otherwise they might interfere with what I'm trying to do over here. So in order to make this code more flexible and less vulnerable to interference from outside, I'm going to pass these variables in as parameters. So I'm listing these parameters here, and these are what are called the formal parameters. And these parameters here are going to have values passed into them, and I'll just show you how they might work. I'm going to write a little test handler. Now because I'm on the card, I'm going to say that when I click on the card, so on mouse up, I'm going to call this handler, and I do that by typing the name of the handler, and because it's got three parameters, I'm going to pass over three values. So let's suppose we move the oval to the right. So my first parameter has to be the direction. They must correspond to these formal parameters here. The ID of the oval was 1023. And the distance, well, let's make it travel 250 to the right. So let's just see if that works. I'll click on the card and you'll notice the oval moves to the right. So by calling this handler, I'm passing in three values to this handler. They're being passed in, and so we say the data flow for these parameters is in. And they're called call by value parameters. We're passing these values into those parameters. Now I'm going to show you a couple of other handlers that use a slightly different mechanism for their parameter passing. Before I do that, I'll just make the point that what I have now is a module of code that is completely independent from the rest of the software. These parameters are seen as local to the handler. So this piece of code is quite closed. It doesn't have any reference to any global variables. Everything is considered local to that handler. So I'll just get rid of this test handler, and I'm going to bring up a couple of handlers that I made earlier. Let's just bring them up to the top here. These two handlers behave in a slightly different way. They're self-evidently getting the direction from the user, and they're getting the distance from the user. But whereas the data flow for these parameters was just in that I was passing the values in to be used by this handler, these handlers have to send the values that they pick up out of the handler so that they can travel in to this handler. Similarly, this one here has to travel out so that it can travel into this parameter here. And the way LiveCode allows that data flow to happen is by using this @ sign. I'm just going to take the @ signs off for the moment so that you can see how this works. And I'm going to move across to the green rectangle where we're going to call the handlers that are on the card. So this is looking at code that's actually sitting on this object here, and I have 3 global variables. This is going to be holding the graphic ID, and which way will be the direction that I want it to travel in, and how far will be, well, how far I want it to travel. So when I click on the green rectangle, the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to put the ID of me, that's whatever I've clicked on, into graphic ID, and then this line, just put that up there so I could see which one I'd clicked on. And then I'm going to call the handler that's called getDirection. And if you remember, there was one parameter. Let's just go over there and show you that. Here it is here, getDirection, and it had one parameter which is called direction. So I need to pass across one actual parameter. So I'm going to write in which way, and hopefully when I call that handler it will pick up the direction, and that will be the value of which way. Get distance, that's going to tell me how far I want the graphic to travel, so I'm going to put how far. And likewise, what I would like to have happen is for these variables to be sent the values that they pick up when that handler is carried out. So get distance, I'll pick up the distance, and when it returns to where it called the handler, I would like that value to be in how far. And that's so that I can call this handler, moveGraphic, which, if you remember, had 3 parameters. Let's just have a look here. The 3 parameters were, let's just move that up a bit, direction, the graphic ID, and the distance. And it's really important that you actually make them correspond so that they're in the same order. So I had direction, which is my which way, and then my graphic ID, and then my distance. So those parameters, those actual parameters, should correspond to the formal parameters. So let's see what happens when I click on the green rectangle. This is me calling that handler, getDirection, and it will pick up one of these options. So let's say I want to move the green rectangle to, well, let's move it up. And I want it to move up the card, maybe let's say 150 pixels. And it's gone right. And this is because, if we go back to this card here, I wasn't allowing the direction that I typed in to travel out so that it could travel in to this handler when I called it. When you put the @ sign in, that's LiveCode's way of making that parameter what we call by reference. These were called by value because we were just passing values in, and these two are called by reference. And what that means is that this word here, this name, is also the name of the parameter that's being passed. So let's just go out to here. This was the parameter that was being passed. So we have a storage location that's called which way, and when we go across to that handler, this parameter here, the @ sign, means that it's also the name of the same storage location. It's referring to the same storage location, so that whatever we put into direction, when we go back to where it was called, it's in the location that is also called which way. And similarly, we have a storage location called how far. When we call get distance, the @ sign means that this distance is referring to the same location, so that when we put a value into distance, it's also being put into the variable that's called how far. So we have a storage location that is being referred to by 2 names. which is why these parameters are called call by reference, and these are called call by value. And we talk about the data flow for these parameters as just being in, and the data flow for these parameters are in and out, because we go back out of the handler and we can see any changes that have been made to the calling variable. So let's see if we can get it to behave correctly now. Let's go onto our green rectangle and let's make it travel to the left, and let's make it travel 300 pixels. So I have that working. Now let's take that code and we'll copy it and we'll stick it on the graphic, the oval graphic, and I'm also going to put it onto the black rectangle as well. And you can see that this has allowed me to shorten the code because they're all calling the same block of code. And so I don't need to type out the same handlers for each of these. I can just, because it's on the card, I can call them, each of these objects can call the handlers off the card. So let's try the oval. Let's go down with the oval, and let's go down 250 pixels. There it goes. And let's send the black rectangle up, and let's send it up 400 pixels. And there it goes. So that's a little explanation of the use of parameters. If you're trying to decide on your parameters, the two questions to ask are, what does the handler need to carry out its task, like direction, the ID and the distance? And then you say to yourself, do these things need to change, or do their new values need to be seen outside the handler, in which case they need to be called by reference rather than called by value. Thanks for watching.